about moving the smaller object about the bigger object. That's how we name it. However, we can always move the bigger object about the smaller object, and the change is still the same, so the motion is still the same. Cap and bottom. Lefty-loosey, because usually the thing you're spinning is the smaller object about the bigger object. Okay? But lefty-loosey from one perspective is righty-loosey from the other perspective. Okay? Repeat myself. So my point is that today I'm going to talk to you about how, yes, flexion, extension, right lateral, left lateral, yay, right transverse, left transverse. But what if we bend the slinky from the bottom to the top? What if we bend the bigger part? What if we take the slinky and instead of bending it like this, what do we do? This. And we can do that because the slinky, right, is attached to our pelvis. So what I have today for demonstration is a basketball that will represent our pelvic girdle. Okay? What is it, a boy or a girl? It's a Rawlings rock. Okay? So keep in mind that the movable vertebra, right, eventually attached to non-movable vertebra. Like I said, when I talked to you, introduced you to the spine, I look at it as a skyscraper, and a skyscraper is allowed to sway, but any skyscraper needs to be built upon a solid foundation to prevent it from sinking, right? So that's what this is. We have bedrock right here. We have fused vertebra here, and a really solid articulation with the sacroiliac joint, sacral, sacrum, fused sacrum. Ilium from the pelvis. This allows just a little bit of play, but it's not like I can take this like an oyster shell and do this. I mean, this is pretty solid up. Muscles, ligaments. Right? So this is meant to be bedrock. This is meant to be a solid foundation on which you can build stuff on top to sway from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference pelvic motion, because this doesn't move very much, right? Because they got this metal rod in it, so it's hard to really bend it. So I'm going to reference pelvic girdle motion with the basketball. So what I want you to consider is that when the trunk flexes, let's do something like this, and I know I haven't. Okay? Get something like this. I know I'm accentuating the pelvis, right? You get something like this. However, we get the same curve, we get the same change if we did something like this. You'd say, well, how in the world are we going to do something like that? Well, you're hanging from a bar, right? Hanging from a Roman chair. You can actually do this with your feet on the ground if you move your hips at the same time. It's subtle, it's hard to see, but basically what I'm doing is I'm taking where the spine actually starts down here, and I'm doing this with it. So I'm still having the same relative change. It's just that instead of moving the top of the slinky, I'm moving the bottom of the slinky. A good practical example of this would be crunches and reverse crunches. Layman's term for when I do this, and again, I'm accentuating it with, right? When I do this, I bet you guys are like, why is that bird exercising? One of my old professors used to do that just to accentuate where you're looking, right? So you saw the beat, you know where you're looking. So keep doing that in honor of him. Okay, so a regular crunch, you'd have flexion on the way up, extension on the way down. You'd be taking the slinky, you'd be bending it, right? Or reverse crunch would kind of look like this, right? Your head would kind of stay here. Like that. Right? And then there would be your legs. It's just it's a simple representation. It's not actually perfectly drawn to scale, because I am a horrible artist. But the point is that in both situations you have flexion. And then on the way down, you'd have extension. So the point is that the spine, when you think of it in terms of a slinky, I can bend that slinky on both ends. I can do this, or I can do this. Yes, sir?
So I'm having a hard time understanding what that represents. So you're saying the first picture represents cervical flexion, whereas the second one is more lumbrothoracic?
No, this is all meant to be trunk.
All trunk?
Yeah.
So the first one's more thoracic and the second one's more lumbro?
Yeah. And we just call it trunk because your thoracic and your lumbo are going to contribute to the bending. It's not all going to happen at your lumbar. For you to just have cervical flexion, if you are on the ground, right, you're just, and for you to reverse it, you'd have to do like almost a back roll, where literally your whole body would have to go over your head to have the cervical flexion. Like you'd have to do literally a back roll to get the bottom part of your cervical to go up over the top. So this is just meant to be the trunk. The same concept exists for the cervical, but it's a heck of a lot easier and practical to show you trunk examples because they're relative to some exercise I'm sure you guys have done. Good question, thank you. And like I said, you can see where it's just a little different. But as you listen and practice and play, you go, okay, I get it. Okay? So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to show you is that trunk flexion could be this or this. Bending, making the curve. Here's another way to look at it, is when I do something like this, to get my trunk flexion, I have hip motion as well, right? And that's what kind of cancels each other out. To show the trunk change in position, I can keep my trunk fixed, Friedrich, and flex my hips to bring them back to anatomical position, and it shows you how my trunk had to bend. Or I could do the opposite. Trunk flexion, bring my hips back to anatomical, right? So I'd have to extend. So we're in the end game now, where I'm going to teach you how to see things. There's clues in the clothing, but man, we have a lot of moving parts potentially. We have hip motion that can move us around. We have trunk motion that can either cancel or summit. Cervical motion that can cancel or summit. And then at the end, I'm going to teach you that the pelvic girdle has a perspective of motion as well. Anterior, posterior, right, left, lateral, right, and transverse. Okay. So let's go frontally. Okay. So I taught you on Monday right lateral trunk bending, left lateral trunk bending. Moving the, and even though there's a lot of mass up here, there's still more mass down there, right? Right lateral, left lateral, right lateral. So what would that look like if instead of moving the top of the slinky, we move the bottom of the slinky? It would look something like this. Okay. There you are. Okay. Let's see. Left lateral. Good. So what would left lateral look like if, let's say, I was hanging from a bar? Okay. So if I did this, get this up a little. So like if you were hanging from a bar or Roman chair, and you did this, would your left shoulder get closer to your left hip? So my left shoulder can get closer to my left hip whether I move the top of the slinky or move the bottom of the slinky. I get the same change. Does that make sense? So in both instances, I had left lateral trunk bending. Follow-up questions or clarifications? If you were doing like a side crunch, right? Left lateral, I guess you can anchor yourself up here and pop your left hip up and also have left lateral. And you can move. It's the same thing as a reverse crunch, but just on your side. It's the same as that. Some people who watch, does anybody like to people watch? Anybody? Like you go to a festival or a fair or the mall and you just like watch people? I do that a lot because I'm a biomechanist, but I don't creep out over it. Like I don't pop popcorn. Just, hey, could you do that again? But I'm fascinating with unique. So remember I talked about, your eyes, you process data, and most people have a type of gait, but I'm fascinated with people who are a little different, who have different kind of gaits. And every year at the Shrimp Festival, maybe around midnight or so, you get some very unique, interesting gaits. And one of the gaits that I'm fascinated with are the people that are walking like this. Now, there's nothing wrong with walking like this. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's interesting because it's different. Different is good. Different is great. I love different. Okay? Hold this. Okay. Here we go. This is about 1 o'clock in the morning. You start seeing walking. Throwing them hips all around, right? Please don't post that. But here's what's cool. Here's what's cool. When people walk and they throw those hips everywhere, right? That's a lot of trunk bending, lateral trunk bending. And there's some hip motion as well. I'm not disrespecting the hips. I'm respecting how you can throw that left hip out, but yet keep your, right? Because I'm bending my trunk to the left. So when they throw that left hip out to knock someone out, all right, when they do this, if they didn't bend their trunk to the left and they kept their trunk in anatomy, it would look like this. Hey, what's up? Oh, yeah. Oh, what's up? Hey, how's it going? Mm-hmm. Your trunk bends back the other way, and it creates this illusion. It's a lot of trunk bending when you throw those hips out to the side. Right lateral, left lateral. How would I have to move to go back to anatomical? I'd have to bend to the right to go straight. I'd have to bend to the left to keep my shoulders level. Okay. One of the tough things about